Meet Lisa Calderon. She wants to be the first female mayor of Denver. Longtime community leader, you're currently the co-chair of the Colorado Latino Forum. You've been involved in a number of issues in this city over the last few years. What do you see as the #1 pressing issue that brings you into the race against Denver Mayor Michael Hancock?
The #1 issue is we're going to look at things through a housing first lens. Everything connects to housing, and whether we're talking about transportation or traffic congestion, education, if people don't have a place to live that works for their lives and the fluidity of their lives of going in and out of life stages, then everything else kind of falls by the wayside. So I just don't think that this administration has put enough emphasis. We have a housing crisis, and it should be treated that way.
Mayor Hancock will say that the #1 issue in the city is affordable housing. So he agrees with you on that. Where do you guys disagree on approach or implementation?
Well, I think you can say a lot of things, but the proof is in the actions. And I'm a Denver native. I've grown up here. I've seen the city change. I think it's problematic when we hear from our leadership that they are prioritizing housing, and yet we see that our homeless population is rising. We see that, for example, my daughter, she's a millennial and went to school, graduated, but she says, "Mom, most of my friends are living with their parents still." We've got to be able to give more people more options.
And how do you do that?
Well, my platform essentially is looking at 3 pillars, so equity, fairness, and justice. So when we look at equity, I'm talking about women, workers, and residents. So, women, I think I've heard from so many women these past several months about we have to do something different with the leadership in Denver. And so I want to really look at strengthening the protections for women to, feel like that they can, be okay in their neighborhoods and their children have a safe place to be. When we look at workers, for example, I want to be able to look at evening the playing field, especially city workers. I've heard from a lot of them who said, I just feel like there's 2 sets of rules, one for the mayor and one for the rest of us. And so we want to even that playing field. And with residents, we really want resident-led development. Right now, it feels very top-down from City Hall. And so we want, the residents are the experts in their communities and their neighborhoods. And so we really want policy to emanate from the community.
Let's talk about that last issue because it seems very housing specific. And Penfield Tate, the former state senator who also got into this race, told me something very similar. That what he hears from people is that the city will come in, tell them what's going to happen in their neighborhood, and then that's what's going to be. How would you shake up that process specifically?
We have a lot of great neighborhood groups. I've been a community organizer, my goodness, for probably 30 years. We have to trust that people are the experts in their lives. They know about the traffic patterns, they know about the trash pickups. They have put in a lot of thought oftentimes about what they would like to see differently. And so many of them come to these meetings, they prepare, they do their homework, or just frustrated, but they want to be part of the solution. And instead, what we often find is that the city has already made up its mind about the planning and the direction for their neighborhoods, and that's got to change.
You referenced this frustration that you say you've heard from city workers that there's one set of rules for them, one set of rules for the mayor. And that strikes me as a comment about his personal conduct. So I want to ask you, do you believe that Michael Hancock has the moral authority to lead the city?
I think he's lost the moral authority. I think that if he would have been upfront, fully disclosed with specificity about what he did and took responsibility, and not only that, it's more than an apology, is how are you changing the policies to make sure that you hold people accountable, namely yourself? And so in talking to many women, and especially in this climate, with everything that's coming out of Washington, they are angry and frustrated oftentimes that they do not feel heard and protected by the most powerful seat in this city, and that's the mayor of Denver.
As we've reported, the mayor's pretty much gotten a pass for his acknowledged sexually explicit text, or not explicit, but sexually suggestive texts that were sent to a subordinate. Why do you suppose that the Democratic Party has given him a pass on this?
I have asked that question repeatedly, and I fully believe that we should not have separate standards by party. I have been calling out even our own party members. We lose the moral high ground when we don't hold ourselves accountable. And we need to call it what it is. Those sexually suggestive messages were sexual harassment, and the mayor needs to own that.
So you have been a vocal critic of the mayor on a number of issues. You're involved in a lawsuit against the city. Do you see how some people might say, if that's not disqualifying, it's at least off-putting? Because I know Lisa Calderon, she's always fighting with somebody at City Hall. Do you get that concern?
I totally hear that concern, and that people might think it's personal, and it's personal, but not because of my lawsuit. That's being handled in the courts. What's personal is that I'm a Denver resident. This is my city too. I see people suffering on the street. I've been a service provider, assisted people with getting mental health services and addiction services, which are not nearly enough. And so, it's personal that I want to change the city for the better. And I think it's actually a good thing that I have been a consistent presence and a vocal critic for more government accountability. So I accept that as well.
Gentrification, development, change, whatever you want to call it. Is it inevitable, and how would you address it as mayor?
So gentrification is the negative connotation to growth. And it means displacing people who have been there. It means not recognizing the cultures that are there. We can do something different, right? We want more opportunity for more people. And if we're able to do that and grow in a way that makes sense for a lot more people, then it doesn't become a competition between those who have more and those who have less, those who come from out of state and those who are native residents.
Is displacement an inevitable factor, though, when communities change and develop?
Well, I think it's inevitable to have transitions. And transitions generally are healthy, but they can also be dangerous times because you're leaving behind one thing and you're starting something new. But it can also be times of great opportunity, depending how it's managed. And the city just this administration has not managed those transitions very responsibly. And so we hope to change that.
I think it's fair to say that you and Mayor Hancock come from two very different parts of the Democratic Party, and neither of you may like my descriptive terms, but he essentially comes from like the corporate side of the Democratic Party. You come from the activist side of the Democratic Party. Don't you think that some of the success that Denver has had, the growth, the financial success, is due to the fact that he is so well connected with business?
Well, I think business is an important part of what we do. To me, this is not about Democrats, it's about power. So I talk to conservatives, I talk to libertarians, I talk to conservative Democrats. It really is about how are we sharing power so that everybody is lifted up. When more people have less than other people, I don't think that it makes them bad people. I think what we need to figure out is how do we create fairness for more people, for more opportunity, and then it doesn't feel so much like a competition.
Last question. Is there any current initiative or project in this city that you would stop in its tracks if you became mayor?
Yes, the I-70 expansion. It's a 10-lane highway expansion. We were told one thing about it being essentially great for the communities, yet the community people are suffering with that expansion. Their streets are being shut down. Being exposed to constant noise now 24/7. There can be a different way of being a multimodal city without basically wrecking through people's backyards.
How would you, as mayor of the city, stop a federally funded, federally approved interstate project?
Well, even with federal projects, they need to abide by certain conditions, especially when they are displacing historically disadvantaged communities. When I-70 was created over 50 years ago, people said, you can't do this. You are displacing a largely Latino community and you're dividing it. And they weren't listened to 50 years ago. So here is now our opportunity to say, we get our highway infrastructure needs to be fixed, but is this really the smartest way, especially when a lot of progressive cities are moving away from multi-lane highways? And
you believe that it is within the mayor or a future mayor's power to stop that project?
I think it's within the mayor's power to wield influence. And if you bring the right players together, including the community residents, and create an equal playing field, then many things can happen that are not possible under this administration now.
Have to follow up with one last question. If not the Central 70 project, which is trying to address a specific need there, which is aging infrastructure, lack of capacity, what would you do instead to fill that specific need?
Well, there have been several alternatives proposed, including building beyond the I-70, so taking it out of the neighborhood.
Reroute it up to 70 and around the city.
That's right. And you know, I live near that highway. I use it daily because there aren't a lot of other routes. I'm also a bicyclist, so I ride the paths along the highway, and it is so I understand the need to improve infrastructure, but there are other and smarter ways to do it that takes the community there now, their considerations a lot more seriously than what we have.
All right, Lisa Calderon in the race for mayor. Look forward to future conversations.
Thank you, Kyle.
Subscribe to the Next YouTube channel for the best of Next and some other stuff.